It is after December 15th, which in the NBA world this season, it means certain guys can be traded. So it's kind of NBA trade season now. We've already seen Dennis Schroeder get traded. We've seen Thomas Bryant get traded. So things are kind of starting to move. I don't expect a lot of moves before closer to the trade deadline, but this is kind of when some things start going down. And when a team like the Brooklyn Nets kind of is winning too many games. So they're like, we got to get off of Dennis Schroeder a little early here. Jordy Fernandez doing too good of a job with that team when they're trying to get Cooper Flag. And so it is kind of time to talk about where the Kings are at and what they need to do at the trade deadline or a little before the deadline here, because it would always be cool if they could get something done a little earlier, because if you put yourself in a tough spot, sometimes the trade deadline's a little too late for guys to make an impact. But the Kings are in kind of a weird spot because they have a top 10 offense, they have a top 15 defense, they have a good net rating. They have all of these good statistics going for them. One of the best teams scoring in the paint, scoring in the mid-range, defending the paint. They have a bunch of lineups that work really well and have really good net ratings. Their top guys are absolutely performing. So the numbers are pointing to this being a very solid team that should make the playoffs. But then you look up and you look at the standings, and as of recording this, December 17th, they're 13 and 14. They're under 500. They've lost a ton of close games. I was scrolling on Twitter as one does, come across the Sat Kings film room tweet or thread where he posts, I think it was like 8 screenshots of the scoreboard with the Kings leading late in games in the fourth quarter. And of course, in each of those games, the Kings ended up losing those games. They've, I think, lost 9 games. 9 games by 5 or less. And so it's a team that was hyped up with DeMar DeRozan coming in, adding to De'Aaron Fox. Like, this is a team that can win in clutch games. And that hasn't been the case so far. They've blown a bunch of fourth quarter leads. And so I don't think there's any real solution to that from the outside that you're going to trade for. That's going to make you a whole bunch better in those clutch situations. So that's something that just has to improve within. When you have Domantas Sabonis, Malik Monk, and obviously Fox and DeRozan, you need those guys to just be able to figure it out on the offensive end. And with the addition of DeMar, like, you have put yourself in a little bit of a weird spot where you have the 4 guys that I listed, and then you have one spot for a wing, which is Keegan Murray. And so defensively, you're kind of capped, but they've still been a solid defensive team. But there may come a time where you need to remove a Malik Monk from that lineup, or even a DeMar DeRozan, if you have that other wing player to match up with another team. There may come a time where you need to remove a little bit of that offense to put in some defense in those clutch situations. And even if you're not doing it in clutch situations, you still need another wing just throughout the game to be a 3-and-D guy, or to slot in when Keegan Murray is not playing, because Keegan has been very healthy. He's played a bunch of games, but less than 24 hours ago, as of recording this, he missed a game against Denver, and the Kings replaced him with Doug McDermott, and Aaron Gordon absolutely feasted inside. 76 points in the paint. That's not something the Kings normally struggle with, but 76 points in the paint because they didn't have Keegan Murray out there. That was a big deal. And they couldn't get a single stop down the stretch because they went with Keon Ellis. And Keon's a great defender, but that's a very small lineup. It wasn't Jokic punishing the Kings inside. Sabonis did a great job defensively on Jokic, but it was the way the Kings had to play everything else because they were so small, didn't have any protection inside, got back cut to death, right? So they need size on the wing, because what happens if Keegan Murray is out for any substantial period of time? We're screwed. We are absolutely screwed. And we've known that for a while now. And, it's something that Monte McNair had, 2 years to fix this problem, and he hasn't so far. So it kind of feels like we're coming to the last chance to fix this at this deadline. We need a wing. Like Jay Crowder, cool, we got Jay Crowder, Isaac Jones has been good on a two-way contract. Isaiah Crawford looks good in the G League. That's great and all, but like you need a little bit more. Like those are great for depth pieces. Though that's not the solution. And so, like at any particular time period, an off season, a trade deadline, like you may not be able to find the guy you want. You may not be able to find that wing. But when you've had like 2 years with the same problem, you got to figure it out. And I feel like this is the last chance to find a wing to help this team. The list of guys that the Kings could go after and that the Kings are rumored with, it always feels like it comes back to the same group of guys. Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Kyle Kuzma, Jerami Grant, John Collins. It's always the same guys. And so I'll talk about each of those guys. And who knows, the Kings could go out, find another guy. There's always other guys that can be had. But it's hard to tell what teams are going to do at the deadline, who they're willing to part with. I don't think there's a lot of tanking teams that are willing to just sell everyone. So you kind of have to look towards the Nets, towards the Wizards, towards the Trailblazers, towards the Jazz. Because every other team's like, we can make the play-in and then we can make the playoffs. And the owners are like, ooh, we want that postseason money, right? So there are less teams willing to just sell, I feel like, now than maybe there was before. And so maybe there's like a Haywood Highsmith that becomes available depending on what Miami does, a Caleb Martin depending on what the Sixers do. Like there are always going to be those guys, but we're just going to focus on some of these other guys on these tanking teams that feel attainable. It is annoying that it's been the same list of guys for what feels like forever now, but I mean, that's just the way it is because none of them have really been traded. And the Kings are in a tough spot because the type of player they want is the type of player that teams just really aren't willing to part with. A 3-and-D wing. Like we have Kevin Huerter and Trey Lyles as our trade chips to make contracts work. But no contending team is going to be like, here's our 3-and-D wing for Kevin Huerter. That's not how the value works in the NBA. And so it's tough. So, either guys are too expensive, teams aren't willing to part with them, like a Markkanen's too expensive, or like the Hawks maybe aren't willing to part with DeAndre Hunter, something like that. So looking at the trade chips the Kings have, it's going to be Kevin Huerter and Trey Lyles. Like those are the big ones. Kevin Huerter is at $16.8 million right now, and then about $18 million next year. Trey Lyles is expiring on $8 million. So that gets you to almost $25 million. The Kings, I believe, I'm not sure, but it's kind of hard to tell. But I believe they're about $2 million under the luxury tax right now. And look, the Kings, they're not going to be willing to go into the luxury tax unless they feel like they can contend for a title because they want that revenue from other tax teams. Like that's just the way it is and it sucks. But I'm pretty sure we're not going into the tax. And we're hard capped at the apron anyways, so there's not a lot of wiggle room anyways. But we have just like this $25 million that we can take in with those two guys. And so let's first look at Brooklyn, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith. It would be great if we could get both of those guys, but when the Warriors traded for Dennis Schroeder, there was a report that came out that said that if the Warriors wanted, I believe, Dennis Schroeder and Cam Johnson, they would have had to part ways with Jonathan Kuminga. So we can apply that to our situation. Keegan Murray would probably have to go the other way. And even if we just want Cam Johnson, they might still ask for Keegan Murray. And so while I love Cam Johnson, I think he would be great on this team, I feel like he's kind of priced his way out of the Kings' range. And there are Kings fans with the way Keegan Murray's been playing, with the way he's been shooting the ball, because he's been great defensively. With the way he's shooting the ball, with the way he's playing offensively, that are like, oh, we should trade him. That is really stupid in my opinion. That would be the ultimate buy high, sell low move if you're trading for like Cam Johnson and giving them Keegan Murray. Like Keegan is on a better contract, rookie contract. You have team control. He's younger. And they're similar players. Keegan's better defensively. And we've seen Keegan shoot the way that Cam Johnson's been shooting. Like, I think Keegan can do what Cam does offensively. And you're going to bring in Cam, who's just going to take a lesser role and be probably worse defensively. That would be such a sell low move. That would be really dumb in my opinion. So I don't want to trade Keegan at all. You want to pair someone next to Keegan, not trade him. But take Cam Johnson out of the equation, I love the idea of a Dorian Finney-Smith alone because his contract is not too big. He's got this year at 14.9, next year at 15.3 on a player option. He's 31 years old, he's 6'7", big wing, good defensively, has been shooting so well this season, like 45%. And, I don't expect that to stay, but he's been a solid shooter his whole career. Had a couple of down seasons the last 2 seasons, but I think he's the perfect 3-and-D guy because he can come off the bench. He can start if you need him to. He can close if you need him to. But he's going to slot in as that 3-and-D role player. He's not going to need a bunch of shots, right? I feel like he just slots into the role perfectly. Plus, he's not going to cost you a lot. Kevin Huerter, some seconds, right? Maybe the Nets will ask for a first, but there's been reports that the price has been lowered on DFS. And so I think for his contract and the price it's going to cost with his age, like I think he's a really good guy to get because I think the Kings should go after the cheap role player. I don't think there is that perfect fit right now that you should push all your assets in towards, especially since whoever you're pushing your assets in towards at this point won't even start. Maybe at some point, like it seems like Monk's locked into the starting lineup. Maybe at some point in this contract, DeMar moves to the bench at some point in the next couple of years. And then maybe that makes more sense for to go and get a forward that can start. So that's why I love the idea of DFS at this point with these 2 years on his contract. Great role player. Because you could go out and get a guy like Kyle Kuzma, who's just, the talent, but I don't think he fits. I feel like I have to talk about him because he's constantly rumored with the Kings. So it feels like they'll end up with him at some point. He's on a declining contract with 2 more years after this year. So that's good. He's cheap because he's not having a great season. Has been shooting awful from 3. So it's a buy low move. But I've never been the biggest fan of Kuzma. There were times where I thought we probably should go get him. But when you got DeMar DeRozan, I don't see the point in getting Kyle Kuzma, especially with how he's been playing. And he's not the defensive guy you need. He's not the role player you need. He needs the ball in his hands more. And so I don't want to go get Kyle Kuzma. And another guy the Kings have been rumored with for a while is Jerami Grant. And that's kind of a similar situation where he's an offensive player. Maybe fits a little better as a role player than a guy like Kyle Kuzma would. But then his contract is just massive, making up to $36 million in his last year, and he's already 30 years old. And so I just don't want to get involved with Jerami Grant's contract, although he fits a little better than a guy like Kyle Kuzma. And I don't even think the Kings can get up to that contract. So that's why I don't see us going in for Jerami Grant. But another guy that I think we could go in for is John Collins, because he's on $26.5 million for the next 2 years, so this year and next, which maybe that's a lot, but again, it is only this year and next year, and he's been having a career season shooting the ball, and I think he fits in a lot of ways. Maybe he's not that lockdown wing defender that you need, but he has the size, and the Kings need that size and need maybe even someone that can play the 5. He can shoot the 3, he has that athleticism. He can score inside. He's a guy who, with his contract, I think you can find a way to get him with Kevin Huerter and Trey Lyles. He may be a little bit expensive because he is having a career year with Utah at this point. But I also think Utah probably wants to cash in on him, I would guess. And so he's a guy who I would definitely be happy with. And then looking at another cheaper guy who, if you can't get maybe the wing that you need, then the Kings still need a backup big because you've been cycling through Alex Len, Orlando Robinson, Isaac Jones. What about Rob Williams? He's had his injury problems, but he would be a great backup big for this team. I mean, he would be so perfect for this team as a backup big, and he's not that expensive. He's making $12 million a year for 2 years here. The Blazers got to free up some center minutes, right? So I think they'd be willing to trade him. And so maybe even if you can trade Kevin Huerter for Dorian Finney-Smith and then Trey Lyles and some picks for Rob Williams, that would be my dream scenario. I feel like I don't think that will happen. I feel like we're just maybe going to get one guy. So if you can't get that wing, if teams aren't willing to sell you or just you get outbid, then Rob Williams is a great backup plan for the backup big spot. So those are the guys I kind of have on my list, my favorites: Dorian Finney-Smith, John Collins, Rob Williams, and guys I don't want: Kyle Kuzma, Jerami Grant, and I would love to get Cam Johnson. I just feel like he's too expensive. There are gonna be other guys, that pop up, but this team just needs to find a way to get a wing player because it's been a weak position for like 2 years. You need to find a way. I feel like Monte McNair has done a great job of building a core, but now you got to actually build around the core with pieces that make sense because you have a non-shot blocking center, you have a small backcourt, and you have DeMar DeRozan out there. Get some defensive wings. Get some defensive guys to pair with them because the core is good. You have to be able to build around them. I know he's limited somewhat because Vivek probably isn't willing to pay the luxury tax, but you got to find a way to get some size in here. But anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. Let me know who you guys want the Kings to go after. I'm sure you have some interesting opinions, some guys I didn't talk about or that I did talk about. I'm very interested in your opinions. And as always, thank you to the members of this channel, No Rain and Joe Mama, for the support. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.